Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the drummer with the Polecats. It is going to be the one and only John Buck, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. The band, which features on vocals Tim Polecat, also Boz Bora, guitarist and vocalist, and I do believe Phil Bloomberg, but I'm not sure that's still the lineup. But anyway, we'll find out more about that in the interview. This is it with John. So after several minutes of casual chat, we got down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years of his musical world and the Polecats. Take notes. Anyway, John, it's over to you.
I'm very much the same as you. I'm a massive Slade fan. My first love in music, Slade, without a doubt. I think the first record I remember getting was in about 71, was Cause I Love You.
Yes.
It heard that. Obviously, like you, I was probably only 7 at the time or something. And so always a massive Slade fan, and Don Powell, massive influence on me as a drummer. I've got an older brother who's about 10 years older than me. So he was into the Beatles and the Stones. So he got me into all that sort of music. And while I was picking up on the glam, and then being that little bit older, he picked up on the punk thing a bit earlier than I did. And then, he dragged me into that as well. And then Rockabilly came along.
So you were quite lucky, because I had a brother who was 7 years old and he was into prog rock. So I kind of worshipped him at the time and thought he was cool, which I'm sure he was. But I got into Yes, Genesis, Wishbone Ash, Barclay James Harvest, and but with Deep Purple and Black Sabbath. So that was a bit unfortunate.
It was not a bad mix, yeah.
And the solo work of Rick Wakeman, I also seem to remember. But he did have 2 albums I loved, which was Sgt. Pepper and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And I sort of, looking back, realised this was the kind of 73, 74, and the Beatles, I didn't realise that the Beatles had only just broken up, really, hadn't they? But it felt like a complete...
That's right. Time. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's like, gone and done, yeah.
They were your last years.
We were too young to realise at the time, I guess.
Yes. And did you come from a musical family at all? Was there anybody who played music in your family? Or
only my brother. My brother was a guitarist, and he was in a prog rock type band, because so he was into all that kind of stuff, Yes, and all that sort of thing. But also he liked stuff like Status Quo, Dr. Feelgood, yes, all that sort of thing. So I picked up on all his record collection, basically. Every time he bought a decent album, whether it was Stupidity by Status Quo or by Dr. Feelgood, or something by Status Quo, I'd listen to it. And he took me to see my first gig, which was Slade at the Rainbow in about 78, I think. So that was
nice. Mine was 9 Below Zero, my first gig, which was just seemed
wow. Where was that?
That was at the Ipswich Odeon. So and they were quite a big band at the time. They were doing songs like I think Treat Her Right, and
they were fantastic though. 9 Below Zero are great. I used to go and see them in London a bit. Yeah.
They were great. They were the sort of, you were just, I can see why, that after that first album, they did struggle, and but they're still going, which is brilliant.
They are still going, yeah.
And it's great that you mentioned Status Quo, because they were the one band that you couldn't ever say anything bad about where I grew up, because you would have got beaten up. The Quo fan was very committed. It was very tribal. You couldn't admit that you couldn't admit to liking mod bands or anything like two-tone. It was just like it was leather, it was bikers, it was just
denim jackets and shirts, and
because most people left school at 16, this was 1980, and just went into either the chicken factory or the farm world or some sort of it was all pretty grim, really. I don't think we had careers teachers. They just went, well, just go in the factory and pluck feathers, I think was
I can't off the top of my head remember anyone from my year at school that went to university, for example.
No.
Everyone went straight into apprenticeships, which would have been the thing at the time. Yeah.
Yes. So with your interest in drumming, was it, Don, that sort of, because we were always a little bit worried, weren't we? Because he had the accident and realised he didn't have any more memory. He'd all gone, hadn't he?
can remember. That's right. Yeah, I think it was that. I mean, I'll be honest. I had some guitar lessons. Obviously, 'cause I wanted to be like my brother. I wanted to be able to play guitar. Well, that's his strap on the wall there. I've borrowed many years ago and haven't given back. So yeah, I took some guitar lessons. Didn't really get on with it. So he said to me, "Oh, the drummer in my band, he's selling his drums. Why don't you get them?" He convinced my dad to buy them for me, which I think he regretted as soon as I started playing it. And it was God. I've never had a drum lesson in my life. But it was just one of those things I managed to pick up on. Used to play along to records in my bedroom and that sort of thing. But yeah, listening to Don Powell, the Big Figure, John Cogham from Quo, and then of course Paul Cook from the Sex Pistols and that sort of thing. That was.
But we did have Cozy Powell, didn't we, doing his solo record?
Which were great. That's right, great.
It's a classic.
Great record. Yeah, you don't get that anymore, do you?
You don't get drum
records that are just basically a drum solo.
The drum solos were very big, and then obviously a bass solo, and everyone had their solos. So when you got to 16, then did you also leave and go and get an apprenticeship and go into the world of employment? Because it was kind of a weird time. Because 79, the 70s were quite nice, but they were quite grim as well, weren't they? I remember sort of.
Oh God, yeah.
There was always a strike. There was always kind of a government being chucked out and a new one brought in. But 79, Thatcher gets in. Then we have the great not the great, but we had the Falkland crisis and war, and then we had the miners' strike, and then we had, Greenham Common. We just all thought we were going to be nuked out of our beds.
Yeah.
So that was kind of it. And I'd sort of got. During that period, I suppose the 80s, that's when I had sort of not rejected, but gave up the prog rock world for a bit more John Peel and things like, I don't know, that world of John Peel and the NME.
Yeah.
So what happened to you when you got to that late teen period?
Well, I'd already started playing in bands by that time. I was in a punk band called the Dead Twats, which basically did Sex Pistols covers. And then I left school, did a year's City and Guilds in motor vehicle engineering, and then worked as a mechanic in a garage. And I guess I'd been there, I left school. When would we have left school? 1980, I suppose.
1980.
Did a year in college, then went to work for probably about 18 months. And in that period, I played in various bands. I'd sort of moved away from the sort of school band. I joined a band called the Cannibals. They've been around for years. There's a guy called Mike Spencer.
God, I've interviewed Mike.
From Trash Can Radio?
I've done a member. Character, Mike Spencer. So he all right, I'll rewind a little bit. Me and my brother used to go and watch a band called The Inmates. Remember, they had a single out The Walk in the early 80s. So we used to go and see them. Friends of his, Mike Spencer. One day we were chatting. I told him I played drums. I was about 15 at the time. He goes, "Yeah, Johnny, come and play drums with us." So I used to travel on the tube all the way down to Brixton, where he lived. He picked me up from Brixton Station, and he lived about 5 minutes drive. And we'd rehearse, and we started playing. So that was my first introduction to a proper band, playing in pubs and that sort of thing. I was about 15, 16. So from there, sort of the rockabilly thing started coming in, and I got involved with a couple of rockabilly bands. I ended up in a band called the Poor Boys, which I was at the time. I was living in Potters Bar, Hertfordshire, around the top of the M25. So it was a bunch of local guys, and we got together this band called the Poor Boys, and we did a single on Ace Records, an EP, and it just so happened that the singer was sharing a flat with Phil from the Polecats at the time, and we did a rehearsal round there once, met Phil, and then within a few months I started playing with the Polecats. It was simple as that, really. God, that is a good one. There are some quite amazing characters you managed to meet at a very early age.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
And at that stage, had the Stray Cats hit? They had hit the sort of charts, hadn't they?
They had, because they'd hit around the same time, because they had Runaway Boys came out. That must have been 81.
Yes.
And the Polecats, John I'm Only Dancing, also came out in 81, and the album came out in 81. So it was all around that similar sort of time, that maybe from 80 through to the end of 81. All that thing was, you look back and you think it must have been a longer period, but it wasn't really. It was quite a short amount of time.
I just seem to remember there was Joan Jett, wasn't there? I Love Rock and Roll, and Stray Cat Strut was kind of heavy rotation, wasn't it? It was that period where you had some classic rock, not classic, but just amazing rock.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. Some great songs. Stray Cats, great band to go and see, and so it was. But I think they must have only just been around in that early 80s, coming into it, because by the time I joined the Polecats when I was up at 82, they were still playing at places like Dingwalls in Camden, because I remember going to see them, and I was in the Polecats at the time. So they hadn't got massive by that point.
But then you had the top. Were you on the top of the Pops performance? No,
because that was 81. It was just before I joined. I came in when Make a Circuit was released. The first thing I did was do the video for Make a Circuit.
Right. There you go. So what was that? Because the band had been going since 77, hadn't it?
Yeah.
So that was kind of like Silver Jubilee punk period, really. Was there just a sort of a change in drummer at that stage?
Well, I mean, from 77 when they formed, there was a different guy called Chris Hawkes, who was playing drums, and I mean he was literally a stand-up one drum, one cymbal guy. Then when they started to get a bit of a break, I think Neil Rooney came in probably 78, 79. So he did the groundwork with them before they got the deal, and they were out playing gigs, and then they did the recording. Yeah, I just think there was they just wanted to go in a bit of a change of direction, move a bit more. I think they wanted to get a bit heavier, to be honest.
Yes.
So they obviously looked for a change. So
because at that stage, there was sort of the rise of the psychobilly scene had started, hadn't it, with the Guana Bats and King and people like that. So was because for me, the 80s was just a fantastic period of music, because I was at that age, you can only be that age once where music means so much. I remember Lemmy.
I know people always joke about it and have a pop at the 80s, but I thought it was quite good.
Oh God, the 80s! I just, actually having started doing these kind of show and doing these interviews, I didn't realise, because I should have done, I didn't realise there were quite so many different scenes and so many different bands. It was like, God, how many bands were there? It's just unbelievable. So, I always had that kind of, there's punk, there's post-punk, there's a bit of new romantic, there's indie pop, there's that Trevor Horn production sound, which was quite irritating. And then you got to the end, you had this sort of dance scene and then a bit of grunge, I suppose. But then there was all these kind of like, there was this, New Paisley, the psychobilly scene. There was, there was just, and the goth scene was huge. And there was
incredible. And of course, all during that time as well, you had the sort of rock stuff coming from California, that real sort of, I guess, bouncing off the glam. They were all a bit glam, weren't they? People like Motley Crue coming through, and that
oh
sort
God,
of thing,
you had LA hair metal. Yeah, I mean
that's it, hair metal. That's all that sort of thing as well, which was
And then you had bands like, I don't know, Dream Parade, Green on Red, the Bangles, all that kind of band. They all had that thing with the Birds that was coming in, and a bit sort of a bit more acoustic. And I suppose REM was a bit more acoustic rock at the beginning, not rock, but, they were kind of indie, I suppose. But there was a sort of an earthiness to them, and then you had that, as I mentioned, the Trevor Horn production of, which I didn't like at all.
No, never got
that sound. So how did the Polecats navigate then the 80s? Because obviously the Stray Cats had hit this kind of, top 10, everyone knew them, everyone loved them. So was there a feeling this was going to be your moment?
I think so, to be honest. I think we thought, well, this could be a big thing. They came over, they looked great, they played really good. They were great to go and watch. Their records were great. And I think we all thought, well, this could be our chance. Obviously, there was 2 or 3 singles that got, Polecat singles got in the charts and that. But then, it all seemed to fizzle out. I think the Stray Cats, by about their third album, it had all gone a bit, just a bit flat, I think, and the whole scene was changing so quickly. It was almost like a sped up version of punk. I mean, punk was only really around for about 3 years in reality. Like the Sex Pistols' lifespan was not much more than that, and and it was you know what I mean. It was like there and it was gone, and then it was something else. And I think it was like that with Rockabilly. It started edging in 1980. By about 83, it started taking a bit of a dip down, and which was a bit of a shame, really. So I think we played. I wouldn't say regularly, but we played and did shows till about 84, 85, I think.
Yes.
And then Boz was doing other things. Phil was producing, people doing other things. By that time, Tim was almost leaving to go and live in America. He married an American girl, so he went to California, and so it all just sort of fell apart a little bit, really. But then until then in the sort of later 80s, it all sort of had a bit of a resurgence. There were more festivals coming along, and we got back together, and I don't think apart from the last 2 years, I don't think we've stopped playing since, to be honest.
Yes, well, I think it's quite interesting, having done this show for quite a bit of time. Most bands do have a bit of a 5-year narrative. They get together, that 12-month honeymoon period is often quite nice. Everyone's a bit enthusiastic, mostly learning what to do and how to make a sound. And there was also the gatekeepers. We had the 80s and 90s you had people, you had a lot of I suppose we had 3 weekly music papers, which was quite handy, and possibly Record Mirror. And then you had John Peel, then you had people like Kid Jensen and Janice Long, who were, would give you, quite a bit of exposure on a sort of major, radio station. And every city and town in the UK, which is a tiny little place, had a venue where, like an alternative kind of alternative venue, so people could get in a transit van and at least feel like they were doing a bit of some gigs.
That's right.
So it kept people going. But then, you had the John Peel session in some, not every band, but a lot of bands have the John Peel session. Then the first album, things are going well. Second album, a bit tricky. Third album, really, everyone's a bit tired.
Yeah. I think, you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
And then, and the other thing, I always remember Lemmy talking about him. I used to love Lemmy and David Bowie. They were born at the same year, and they always said their musical influence was always, Little Richard, then it was kind of Elvis, then it was Eddie Cochran and all those. And, as Lemmy said, you can only be 18, 16, at that one time. And that's the music that's going to have that massive influence, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think with any band, the next generation, I think every 5 years there's a next generation come along and they kind of want their sound. And it's almost, for a musician, it's like, oh my God, what's now trendy? And I think by the late 80s, all those indie bands that I used to love, they all sort of gave up because it was like, well, no one wants to hear us because they want to hear the Stone Roses or the Happy Mondays or,
all that stuff had started coming on, hadn't it? Yeah.
Yes. So you kind of go, sorry guys, but not many people. Everyone who were your fans, so all of a sudden having to get mortgages or own their own place or renting, and they've got other commitments. They can't kind of base their life around seeing the gig. So what was it like then? Did the band completely finish then in the sort of mid 80s for a bit?
I guess. I mean, we're all still in touch, although Tim was in the States, I've been visited him a couple of times, and I was still in touch with Boz. Boz and I still played in various bands together. Still in touch with Phil. So it wasn't like we'd fallen out or anything like that. It was just that at that point we had other bits and pieces to do. We were getting on with life, but we were still playing music. And I think it must have been about 88. We got offered a headline a big festival in Holland. So we literally turned up at the Harwich to get the ferry over to the Hook of Holland.
Hook of Holland on Zeebrugge?
Oh, that's right. That's it. Yeah, get on the old ferry. And that was, I think, the first time we'd all been together for probably about 3 years. So
yes. And was this where you did the next album as a band? Is this where you did Won't Die on vinyl?
That's right. Well, that's right. So after we did that gig, a few more, people say, "Oh, Polecats, you're still around. Great. Let's, started getting us together." The guy from Vinyl Japan contacted us, said, "Will you do an album?" So we did that. I think 89,
Yes.
and which was great. He then took us to Japan. And Japan was mad because it was like it was here in the early 80s. The rockabilly thing was massive there, and the people go totally, if they're into it, they're into it. They turned up, they had all the records. They had all the records that any of us had ever made with other bands, all to get signed. And what they said, one guy turned up with a Mini that was painted pink, Polecats logo on it. We thought we were the Beatles. It was incredible.
Yes.
So, and we did that we went, through the end of 80s, where from 90 through to later in the night, we went over there about 5 times. So
yeah, well, it's funny because Vinyl Japan sort of signed a lot of these kind of indie bands that I like, much more jingly jangly, and some of them kind of shoegazing, but they seem to really pick up. So there's these artists who'd play in front of 20 to 50 people in the UK at some art centre on a Tuesday night. They go to Japan, they get the offer to make an album. They go, "Oh, thanks very much. We've never seen so much money in our life. Would you want to come to Japan?" It's like, "Well, might as well." And it's like, "My God, we are superstars here." And it was a bit.
I know. That's how they treat you there. That's exactly how you feel. It was incredible. So
we didn't
mind going there at all. Not the sort of place you'd go to normally. So
well, no, I don't think I'd ever been to Japan. I've never been. But yes. So then does Boz then leave again? Is this kind of once that's done?
I mean, even then, when he started playing with Morrissey, I don't think he ever left as such. He just wasn't around as much. So when he was here, if the Polecats had gigs, because with Tim living in the States since the late 80s, we've had to manage how we do gigs. So we get him over for like a month at a time, and we'll fit as many gigs as we can. And we might do that once or twice a year. So if that fitted around Boz being free, then Boz did the gigs. But if not, we started developing a sort of substitute bench of good guitarists who could fill in for him. So it weren't ideal at first, but all three of the guys that we've used over the years are all fantastic guitarists, and always do a good job.
So is it the case then the Polecats is kind of really a side hustle that you just kept going for the love of the band?
Yeah, exactly that, because we enjoy it. We all still enjoy playing. I play in a couple of other bands. Phil plays in several different bands, including with Mark Armand. He's doing a lot of shows with Mark Armand at the moment.
Yes,
and Tim obviously started doing some solo shows in the States. We go over there and play with him in the States, the Polecats, number of times. He started doing got the band 13 Cats together with Smutty and Slim Jim and Danny Harvey.
Danny Harvey. Jerry Lee Lewis's is he married to Jerry Lee Lewis's relative?
Granddaughter.
I know, he's such a cool dude.
Lewis's granddaughter, which is quite. I'll tell you a funny story about Jerry Lee Lewis. So the first second ever gig I did, the first ever gig I did with the Polecats was at Nottingham University. Second ever gig I did was supporting Jerry Lee Lewis at the Theatre Royal in Plymouth, and that was the first night of a tour we were doing with him. Second night was at Hammersmith Odeon. So we got friendly with his band, and we'd seen him, hadn't met him, but second night in Hammersmith Odeon, we'd done our set. We were just coming out of our dressing room. They were all coming out of their dressing room. And we were saying, wishing them good luck, have a good show, guys. And they all left. And he's still sitting in the dressing room. And I'm with Tim. And we thought, it's Jerry Lee Lewis. We can't miss this. And we read and said, Jerry, nice to see you. And he goes, "You boys are in the wrong dressing room now. Fuck off." Okay, Mr. Lewis. Thank you, sir. We'll be off then. So that's my claim to fame. So I got told to fuck off by Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh, that's a classic, isn't it? I mean, God, you have to have such an attitude, don't you?
Yeah. Mate, sure. Sorry.
Blimey, yes, you wouldn't forget that one in a hurry, would you? God, that's a. I didn't see that one coming. Yes, and neither did you, did you? No, because actually, I suppose yes, Danny and Lemmy got together with Slim, didn't they, to do the Head Cats?
The Head Cats, that's right. Yeah,
which was a really good sort of little.
Which was great. Yeah, great combination.
Fantastic. I know. So yes. So then with sort of keeping the band going, is it again a case because you've got a lot of albums? Are these all kind of live dates and sort of live kind of concerts that you put together?
Yeah. At the minute we've got a bunch of gigs starting on Friday. Tim flies in from the States tomorrow. We start on Friday. We've got a gig in Germany Friday night. Then next week there's a big, I guess it's a psychobilly festival in Pineda in Spain, near Barcelona, right on the coast. Fantastic. It's been going for, blimey, 10 or more years now. So it is primarily a psychobilly festival, but we get booked on it every now and again. I think they like to mix it up. I think they got Restless are playing, the Guana Bats are playing over the weekend, and we're playing on the next Sunday night, and then we've got I think about 5 gigs in the UK, and then 1 in Italy. So that'll take us over about a sort of 5-week period, and then Tim will go back, and then I think he's coming back in. I think we've got some more in September lined up. So
my God, you do really well keeping it all together, don't you?
Well, yeah, it's a bit, especially with Boz now spends a lot of his time in Portugal. He's got a house up in the mountains in Portugal. He bought with his ill-gotten gains from Morrissey, and he's got a recording studio there. So he seems to spend a lot of his time there now. And so it's the logistics of getting him here, getting Tim here, making sure Phil's available, making sure I'm about, and getting it all together. So this will be the first. In fact, Friday will be the first time we've all been together since February 2020, when was the last gigs we did, about 3 weeks before lockdown, the original lockdown.
Lockdown. Yeah, so is it the case? I remember doing an interview with old Woody Woodmansey from David Bowie's Spiders from Mars, and because he's got a gig, he's got a thing with Holy Holy, with Tony Visconti. So when they get their little tour together, they just literally, will rehearse for a few days before the first gig, and it's like, well, we know our bits, we can practice those on our own, and then we just have a couple of nights together or a few days together, bash it out, and then we're ready to go. Is it the same with the Polecats? Do you manage to sort of do it that quickly?
I think on this occasion, the rehearsal is going to be the first gig. I've got the sets. I printed the sets out yesterday, and I've sort of kept all the sort of songs that we could sort of play with our eyes shut on there, just for the first one. We have recorded some new stuff, which we're just finishing off, and we were hoping to get out as an EP for these gigs, but it just hasn't come together in time. So we might try and slip a few more ones for these new songs in as the gigs go on. We can get together, but just because it would have meant getting Tim in a few days earlier and getting Boz in a few days earlier. Just logistically, it's a bit
too much. So when was the last time the band were in a studio and recording new material?
We went into Bozzy's studio in Portugal in November 2019, and the plan was to get something out in 2020. So we were doing some gigs in November, and we had a week between shows. So we said, well, look, we're all here. Why don't we go to Bozzy's studio? We get a week in Portugal, which is going to be a bit warmer than it was in London. Yeah. We can do some songs, which we did. We went and I think we put down about 5 songs, and then of course COVID hit, and that was all kiboshed. But Phil and Tim were sort of eventually later in 2020 got a bit proactive and got some more songs together. They both got recording facilities themselves at home, so they were pinging songs and ideas backwards and forwards, and we eventually got enough with a bit of what we did at Bozzy's and a bit of new stuff. And about 3 months ago, Phil and I went into a studio in London, and I put all the drums down. So we've got 4 tracks. ready to go. We sent them to Boz in Portugal. He's done the guitar on it. So we're hoping some point this year we'll have this EP out.
Yes. Has music become one of the most important parts of your life as you sort of, as we all get a bit older? Has it sort of taken on more significance?
Yeah, you know what? I've had a day job ever since mid '80s. Since when the Polecats sort of quieted down a bit, I've got a day job, and I've had one ever since. So I've always done it as a side thing anyway, if you like, you know.
Yes.
And because I love it and we have a good time. But yeah, I think it's become, and I think what brought that on was lockdown, to be honest. I massively missed being out to play.
Yes.
Because being a drummer, it's very difficult to get your drums out if you like your neighbours, you know, and have a bash. So I sort of went against all my instincts and I've got an electric kit. And in fact, actually, I'll be honest, it was my wife and daughter bought it for me for a Father's Day present because they were fed up with me moping around miserable because I couldn't play drums. And it was the best thing I've done. But played that. I was able to practice the new Polecat stuff, so it worked for that.
Yes.
And playing now. I play in another band that do sort of punk and new wave covers, and we just play in pubs. And I do that, let's say, every other weekend. And so I don't think I've played as much since, you know, at all, you know, so regularly than I have in the last year, since we all got let out of lockdown and could get out and do things, and places started having bands on.
Yes.
I've just fitted as much in as I can and just really, really enjoying it. Really enjoy doing it. You know, I suppose, you know, you think you when you look at it different when you're getting older. You think, well, all right, we're not all Paul McCartney, you know, or Mick Jagger who can do it into our 70s and 80s, and maybe you've only got a limited time left to be able to do it at a decent level. So I think you just got to fit as much in as you can.
Yeah. Well, I suppose what I've noticed in my 50s is that, you know, one sort of took a lot of things for granted, especially health. And then suddenly, you know, like your own health starts having some interest and issues, and then other friends have an issue. You know, everybody I know, you know, we now have a conversation about some sort of ailment or hospital appointment that we've got, or some sort of operation that's happening, which is like, Christ, this is interesting. I think this is going to be what it's like. So having moments where you think, actually, I feel good, I'm just going to go and do this, and I'm going to do that because I can't take it for granted. Yeah. And then seeing Paul McCartney, or seeing the Rolling Stones as we do, still touring, you're thinking, my God, and Iggy Pop, you do feel a little bit more like you've got to just take the moment, haven't you? You can't be cool. And especially with lockdown, I think, you know, a lot of bands are like, I'm not sure if I'm bothered. And it's like, well, don't worry, because there's no gigs or no nothing. Yeah, I think everyone's gone, I'm going to make up with my team and my mates and the other members of the band, because actually I'm not going to get a new band, and these guys, you know, women, you know, we do know each other and we can do it. We just need to put a few of those trivial little issues to one side, which, let's face it, they pretty are, you know.
They're normally very trivial.
Very trivial.
Extremely trivial.
And perhaps if we all read the room better and don't say so many things, we probably get on even better. So it's like, let's just enjoy the music. I just wondered if you know, with you and the band, you're starting to sort of think, God, actually, we're quite a nice gang and we've got a nice little thing going here, and it keeps us amused on our sort of weekends and evenings to play music.
Exactly that. And we, you know, I think we enjoy getting together and seeing each other, because, you know, Phil and Boz and Tim have known each other since they were, you know, 14, 13, 14, 15 sort of age, you know, at school together and you know, the scouts together and that sort of thing. So they've known each other an awful long time. So, you know, seeing each other now for a month every year, every 12 months is great.
And are you finding you know, old fans are coming out of the woodwork? Did you find that there's new kind of fans coming? Because I noticed your Spotify playlist or monthly listening is really high, and it's like, wow, that's really amazing. So I just wondered if there's a whole new wave of band audience who are sort of kids who just think, actually, I really like the rockabilly, psychobilly scene that, you know, happened in the 80s.
Totally. You go to some of the festivals. We like the Pineda one in Spain, or we do one in called the Bedlam Breakout in Northampton, which again is kind of a psychobilly thing, but they get us on because we're not strict rockabilly, are we? We're a bit more sort of funky, and we put a bit of effort into it. There's still all the old faces who are blokes of our age, but and new bands as well. There's tons of good new bands of young kids playing rockabilly, which is great.
Yes, because I've sort of realised with doing this, there's kind of often only a 25 to 30 year sort of period where I think when something happens, we all take it for granted, and then we get on with the rest of our lives and do what we need to do. And then sometimes look back, not necessarily with rose-tinted sunglasses, but you think, actually, there's a lot more better, it's a better scene sometimes than I took, remember it, and it's quite interesting. And there's a lot more other bands that I've discovered from the 80s that I missed the first time, which I realised, there's a lot of quite interesting things that happened during that period. And every decade and every generation will experience that. I just realised that was my period, was the 80s mostly. And there was just a lot of different scenes, a lot of different bands that used to happen. And and I noticed in lockdown everybody was writing their book, and there's been little films coming out from different bands like The Wedding Present and The Nightingales and The Slits, and all these kind of bands that I'm sure at the time we just went, well, whatever, who cares about The Wedding Present and The Nightingales? And it's like, no, actually they're really good. So I just wondered if you've kind of found that the Polecats and the Stingrays and all these bands are sort of getting much more kind of critically acclaimed.
I mean, the people that come up to us and say, well, we started a band because we listened to the Polecats. And you think, well, that's great. We're not the Rolling Stones or Beatles, but it's nice to have somebody say that we started playing because we listened to your music. I mean, okay, great. Job done, really. Job done,
yes. And have you found that with the band, everyone's playing has changed or improved greatly from those early years? Because you've all done so many different things, haven't you? So from those early late 70s to early 80s, everyone had a certain amount of skill, but then you've all done tons of things. I just wondered how everyone's changed musically.
I'd say, you're right. I mean, obviously, Boz was always a great guitarist, but playing with Morrissey for 20 years, doing 40 shows a year, of course his playing has got massively better. I mean, he's always been great, but he's really great. Phil as well. Phil's he's so diverse as a bass player. He's classically trained to a degree anyway, but he's done so many different things. He's done. He was involved in a show, Walk Right Back, which was a stage show about the Everly Brothers.
Oh, so yes.
He played, in the band in that, and he's playing with people like Mark Armand. He plays electric bass with Mark. Does so a totally different thing. But because he reads music and he writes parts and stuff, and so he's playing. He's very good. He's I've played with several different double bass players, but in my opinion, he's one of the finest double bass players. Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting. And do you get Smiths fans appearing at the gigs as well?
Yeah, loads. Smiths and Morrissey fans, and you'll find there is a bit of a crossover. There is a crossover because some of them are kind of rockabilly looking, but maybe a lot of the people who got into the Morrissey thing, the solo stuff early on, was when you had Boz, Alan White,
Gary Day,
who were all rocking. They were all in rockabilly bands.
Yes.
So they all looked rocking, and Moz kind of made himself look a little bit like. So a lot of the people look like that, even though they might not really know much about rockabilly, or they might know about rockabilly from the Polecats and the Stray Cats onwards. They don't know anything from the 50s or anything like that,
Yes.
So, but they've got that look. But they turn up. Yeah, they turn up at Polecats gigs, and it's great because they turn up whether Bozzie's there or not, because they think, okay, well, this band are okay, we'll come and see them.
Yes, well, absolutely. I mean, it's quite interesting because I was a massive Smiths fan, and then I didn't sort of pick up on the solo stuff until a bit later, and then I went back and listened and went, oh, this is good, especially the early solo stuff. I thought was stunning, but yeah, I think the Smiths consumed me for 5 years, and then it was just all too much, and it was just kind of interesting how the different members kind of went in different directions and must have had to play quite a lot of different music really to keep a day job, which was quite interesting. So yes, it's interesting that everyone sort of managed to diversify so much. So if you were able to tell or whisper to if you spent some time with your 16-year-old self starting out, what would you kind of want to whisper in their ear when they were when you just thought, there is a few bits of quite good advice or wisdom that you've discovered over the decades?
I'd say don't be afraid to do anything. If you get an opportunity to do it, whether it's a show or play with a band, whether it's not, even if it's out of your comfort zone, even if it's playing something that you're not used to, do it. Don't miss out on it. Do it.
Yes.
Because it's an experience and it's education, and it's learning your instrument, and play as much as you can. Don't miss out on anything. Do it.
Yes, because I mentioned right at the start, my first single was David Bowie's Space Oddity, but my first album was Changes One that had John I'm Only Dancing, which always had that really interesting bit of stereo. Is that still one of the most popular tracks you play in the set, or is there other ones now?
Number one on the list, first song every night. First song.
Excellent. Is that just which is the one that gets the most kind of response from the audience?
That does Rockabilly Guy, I think, which we always leave till the end, because that's a bit of a anthem, I suppose. But Make a Circuit, which you take the double bass out, it's not really a rockabilly song at all. But that we didn't play it for years. Didn't play the song, I don't think, until into the 90s. We didn't play that live. But actually, it was the biggest hit in America. The video for that used to get played on MTV throughout the 80s a lot. It's been on TV shows in America. What was it called?
Was there
Glory
a film?
Days? Glory
right.
Days. It was on that. Wall-E, the film Wall-E.
Yes, and the soundtrack to Joey as well, wasn't there?
That's right. Yeah, there was several of those sort of films that they've used it in the soundtrack for, and a lot of people know of it, know of the song. But it's not. I mean, it's not strictly rockabilly at all, But we started playing it again, and everybody loves it.
Yes, I know when the Rockabilly they got a producer, I think it was Tim Palmer, to try to give them that hit. The hit is quite hard, isn't it? And I think they did a song called Make a Move, and it was
Make that move.
And it's like, it's all right, but it doesn't have that. Do you find as a musician, that something that makes a song like, wow, that is amazing? Because I don't know if you ever listened to it, but there's that recording of the Trogs in the studio, and they're trying to record a song, and he keeps, they're really swearing at each other, and they kind of keep going on to the drum about this.
And he goes, the fucking drummers, I shit them.
I can't play the fucking, and he keeps, and the singer keeps saying, sprinkle some fairy dust on the thing. I mean, do you ever in the studio or in the rehearsal, when you're thinking, let's try and write this song, do you get that kind of like, God, what is it that makes a song amazing? How frustrating is it?
Yeah, I suppose it can be if it's not going quite right. But we're lucky that with Phil and Tim, they've both got, when they get a song together, especially on these latest songs, when they've got an idea in their head of how it sounds and how they want it to sound.
Yeah.
And for the most part, when they're thinking of the drums, they're thinking of me playing them. So they'll think, well, okay, John would probably do this. And because we've been playing together for 40 years, we kind of know what each other would do. So it works out quite well. And I think these latest recordings we did, because it wasn't like a normal session, us all going in together, because there was a backing track with a drum machine playing on it. And I went in and played them. And what they put down as the drum track in their heads was very similar to what I played, because they knew that that's how I would play it.
Yes.
So that was quite interesting. So there wasn't so much of a me going in and doing something different, because they already knew the sort of the style,
Because I've done a lot of interviews with drummers, and two of them had a really bad time in the studio with the click track. I hate it.
It has to be very loud, mainly because I'm completely deaf. But it has to be a certain click to be able to, I can't be just like a. I prefer something that sounds more like maybe a snare drum sound,
right.
So crack of something like that. So it's a bit more distinctive. But that can be an issue. Yeah.
Did you find that kind of quite a difficult jump to make from your younger teen period to sort of like to the next stage where you're in the studio, and the history of bands is quite sometimes kind of ruthless, isn't it, where suddenly a member of a band gets sidelined, and the drummer is such an important member, isn't it, more than anybody else? It's like the goalkeeper. If you make one mistake as a goalkeeper, you're forever remembered for that kind of like, whereas a bad pass or bad tackle or bad cross, no one cares, but Peter Shilton against Poland, we'll never forget that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So do you feel like, come on, guys, I'm the but the drummer is so important. Everyone says, God, you've got to have the drummer. Did you have to change, or did you have to sort of have lessons, or did you, how did you cope with,
You just had to adapt to it, because, you're right. In the early days, you go in and you all just play together, and, you'll record the guitar, the bass and the drums at the same time, playing live, and then you might overdub the lead and the vocals and whatever else. But, so then going in and doing it bit by bit, I think is difficult, because when you're playing, like especially with the drummer and the bass player, especially with a double bass, there's so much interweaving with the bass and the bass drum and the drum patterns.
Yes.
So you need to get that right, and that's difficult to do if you're not both playing at the same time. So what we do sometimes, and what we did when we recorded some of these songs, especially the ones in Portugal, Phil would be playing at the same time. So we'd play our bit. Boss would play a guide guitar, but we just record the drums, and then Phil would redo his bit. But you get the feel, you get that feel because you're both playing together. So but the click track thing is annoying. But I find I just have to have it right, just how I like it, and then it's okay to play it a few.
Yes, because I went to see that an exhibition in Manchester, and it was Factory Records, and it was, Joy Division. And I know with the band, they were really disappointed when they heard that first album, Martin Hannett's kind of production. And then it's like, well, no, it's quite good. I'd stick with it. But do you ever sort of find that kind of a bit surprised when you sort of record it and then you hear it back eventually and think, not quite sure about that? Or is it kind of always a happy surprise?
But very often it is, or more often than not, it is a happy surprise. And you think, actually, that sounds great. We did a great job. There was one of the tracks we did in Portugal that we redid the drum part on in London for the EP, and that was exactly like that. We listened to it back a few times after we'd recorded it, and over the next sort of 6 or 8 months. Oh, well, that could be better. We could do that better sound, better playing. And I said, I'm not happy with it, so let's redo it. So we redid it, and it was just I used my own drums, which made a difference to me because I was more comfortable with it. And there was a lot of tom work in it, and it sounded a million times better.
Have you found it's better, you get a better recording if you've been playing those songs live before you then put them in the studio, so you kind of work out a bit, you can tweak them and you see how the reaction from the audience, because I know in the good old days, especially in the 60s, I suppose bands used to play all the time, didn't they? And the Beatles at Hamburg, they just had to sort of test their material live before they were in the studio, so obviously they could tweak them. And I know bands like Twisted Sister, who I never liked, but they were 10 years, on the road before they, managed to get a record deal. But they'd sort of crafted it so they kind of knew what would work and what wouldn't work because they'd seen the reaction from the audience. I just wondered if you often, because I remember one band, they did the album, they weren't at all pleased with it. They hated the producer. They toured it and they thought, God, if we could record the album now, it'd be so much better.
So much better. Oh God. Oh yeah. And I've made other records. I don't think I've ever felt that with the Polecat stuff. I think we've always been happy with it. There's songs that we might have recorded, and then over the years of playing them, we've tweaked them a bit, so they're better. And maybe you could say you could go back and if you could record it again. But for the most part, I think I'm personally happy with it. There was the singer with the band, the Poor Boys I mentioned earlier. Listening to it now, and a lot of people, it's sort of become a bit of a collector's EP, and but I listen to it now and I think, oh God, if I could record that again now, it would be, sound would be better, the playing would be better, it would just be, the songs were great, but if you did it now 40 years later, it could be that'd be really great.
Yes. So you've got the tour and then the album hopefully at the end of this year, or is it early next year?
Well, I'm thinking the plan is for a 4-track EP. What we want to do is 2 or 3 4-track EPs, and then add another 4 songs and release it as an album.
Yes.
Something like that. So it'll be 12 tracks. That's the kind of the idea at the minute.
And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview, apart from the last little bit. But on this occasion, you probably don't need to hear that. A massive thank you, as always, to John Buck, drummer with the Polecats, who, as he said, is active. They're recording, they're touring. It's all good stuff. Anyway, huge thank you for that. This has been the C86 Show. I'm David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just do C86 Show. Also, these have all been archived. Aren't you lucky? You can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. True. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.